Hey there, this is Dr. Pam Perry, and you are here for another episode of Get Out There, Get Known. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a live guest today in the studio. They are getting set up right now, and it is none other than Marc Clarke. And he's a veteran television broadcast journalist, been for a long time. So I want you to kind of buckle up and listen to some of the things that he says that he does when he's picking guests or when he's interviewing guests and even when things don't really work out exactly how we want, how we kind of handle and navigate those type of things as well, because sometimes technology will just not let us be great. But you're going to see how Marc Clarke handles all of this and with a cool. So I'll bring him back right after this.
Welcome to the Get Out There and Get Known podcast. Join Pam Perry, veteran PR strategist, Emmy award-winning producer and publisher of Speakers Magazine, who will show you how to crack the code in getting out there to get known. Each week, she either interviews her media friends, PR colleagues, or she just goes solo, offering you strategies on publicity, publishing, and platform building. So listen up to hear how to get booked on media places and on superstar stages. Now, here's your host, Pam Perry.
Hey there, like I promised, there he is. There's Marc Clarke. All right, all right. So we're gonna give people a little bit of chance to let them know what's going on because normally you're in TV and you get all the bright lights and all that. So tell us how you have navigated, and this probably happens to you all day, every day. Things don't work out right. So where are you right now?
Yes, Pam. I had a 2 o'clock meeting that, of course, you know how these meetings go. They never wrap up. We hadn't even got to the meat and potatoes, and I'm like, look, I got to take this. So, of course, I had my phone as opposed to being in my studio with the lights. I had my phone. Now I set up out in the other area, but you could hear them in the background. So I'm not going to tell you what room I'm in. I'm just going to say we made it happen, and thank you for your patience. You look amazing, and please
Hey,
don't judge me. Don't judge me because I coach people about this, and I'm violating my own rules. So
no, no,
thank you
no,
for
no.
being patient.
But you coached it, and one of the first rules that you did was that you honored the time. So one of the things that we even talk about is if you're going to be a media guest, to show up at the time that you say you're going to show up. Hook or crook, whether you're doing it in the car, whether you're doing it in the club, wherever you're going to do it, you're going to make sure that you show up. And we always say that sound is better than visual. So we want to make sure the sound is always good. So we can kind of tolerate bad visuals, but we can't tolerate bad sounds because we really want to hear because sometimes we not even are watching. But I really just appreciate the fact, Marc, that you are joining us today. And the first thing I want to say is that you and your wife both are married to the media. So tell us a little bit about what that part is. It's married to the media because Allison and you both have television. So give us a backstory about that, because then we'll get into the other part of, about your career I want to talk about.
Okay, so yeah, so my wife is Allison Seymour, who's been a morning news anchor in Washington D.C. for over 20 something years, and in fact, shout out to my wife who is going to be awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Washington uh, National Association of Black Journalists. So I,
WABJ. Okay. All
yeah,
right.
I
All
tip I
right.
tip my
WABJ.
hat to my wife, who also is in the her alma mater's Media Hall of Fame at Hampton University. So you can see her
Ooh.
beautiful face when you visit. So think about her then. And
Hampton is no joke. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and so
Mm-hmm.
we met actually her first day when she was working in St. Louis. I met on her first day. I had been in the market doing radio for 6 years, and I saw this beautiful new sister, and I said, so Doc, I had to approach and say, you must be new.
Can I get those digits?
Here's my card. My name is Marc Clarke, because you know how it is. The reality is, and you're too young to remember this, Doc, but there was a time when there was only one, maybe one and a half African American news anchors in markets, and so when you saw somebody, you knew it. You're like, okay, like I said, you must be new, because again, I know everybody,
Mhm.
which gladly is changing. You're seeing more African Americans, I think, on the platforms now. But so yeah, so she's been doing her TV thing. I was a radio guy for 30 plus years, and I just recently segued into TV the last 5 years. And so,
Okay.
and I just jumped out the window. I'm no longer at Fox 45 in Baltimore. I'm actually doing, for the first time in my career, really doing my media company. So I'm excited about it. I'm uh, excited and scared at the same time. But
What's the media company? Give me the link so I can put that up. What's the
yeah,
website?
Marc Clarke Media Group.
Marc Clarke Media Group. Okay, I'm gonna add that on there. Marc Clarke
Yeah,
Media Group.
Media Group.
So
Yeah, you can
Marc
go to Mark.
Clarke
Yeah,
Media Group.com.
yeah, yeah. You can go to markclarkmedia.com for the website. Yeah,
Okay, Marc Clarke Media.
but
All right, I'm
so
gonna add that.
Doc, I've been in this thing a long time, and so me and the wife, the irony of us both actually working in the field and being in media, birth married in media,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and so that's what we do a podcast, the Married in Media podcast, a couple different podcasts, but I'm excited about that and excited about wherever this journey takes me, and I'm not above taking another gig while I also figure it out.
Yeah, well, the main thing is that when I find that people who've been in radio for a long time, I'm from Detroit, so Donnie Simpson was just retired. He was in radio for
Come on.
about 40 years. So, people who are in broadcast, they love it because that's just what they are. So, give us the genesis of how you decided to even go into radio and television, and now doing the TV, and what the differences are, and when you're booking guests or training guests, what they have to do differently for each medium. So, where did the bug start for you in terms of broadcasting?
First of all, great question, Pam. Doc, that's a great question. Yeah, I was one of those few people who knew what I wanted to do as a kid. So it started. Now, some of your viewers remember these names. So I think when I literally look at it, being from small town America, Springfield, Illinois, our Black person on television was a young Fred Hickman, the late Fred Hickman. I don't know
Oh,
if
yeah.
you ever knew Fred, but Fred
Yeah.
Fred got on TV like at 21 in Springfield, which is crazy. And Fred went
And
on to go to CNN. He became a star at CNN, and he had this amazing career. And so growing up, I went to school with his niece, and he was my first, like that was that first person I saw do it, like from my
mhm.
hometown, where you can do it. And then also on the radio, again, Springfield did not even have a Black radio station back then. So we used to hook our cable to I used to hook our cable to the radio, and I pick up St. Louis,
Oh
St.
my God.
Louis, and so Magic 108 St. Louis was where the dream began. And my mother worked for Social Security and hated her job, and that made me vow that I was going to do something that I loved and I was passionate about. And
Yes, that is
so
so true. And most
I
people
was,
who are most people who go into media is because it's a love, it's a passion. It's not because of a paycheck. And I
oh
will
no,
say that for most journalists that I know, they do it because it is a love, a passion. It's something that they've always done.
it's
So yes,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, so I
yeah.
started off, and what also saved me, Doc, was I never, I didn't have any of the just because it doesn't make sense, um, just because it's not logical, don't go for it. I didn't have that. I didn't. I remember I graduated from high school, and I wrote a letter to WGCI in Chicago, Magic 108 in St. Louis, and KKBA in Dallas. It was like, "Dear Magic 108, my name is Marc Clarke. I would like to work at your radio station." So I had no I had no understanding, but I had no fear either, right? And so
Mhm. Mhm.
I went to junior college. So first of all, I'll tell you that how that happened. God's amazing. So I had terrible grades. I did everything you could do on the microphone in high school. So I did all the announcements. I was in junior
Mhm.
achievement and radio. I did everything. And so when it's time to go to college with my mediocre grades, I told my mom, "Yeah, I'm going to go to blank, blank, blank." She said, "No, you going to Lincoln Land Community College." And I was like, "No, I'm not. I'm going to the Marines." And so I did. "You're going to Lincoln Land Community College and signing up for ROTC." I was like, "Oh." And so, when I was in Lincoln Land, I went to every radio station. Now, remember, I told you Springfield didn't have any black radio stations. So I went to every radio station and tried to get a job. And I actually got a job as a board operator. So while I was in junior college, I got a job as a board operator at WTAX, WDBR in Springfield, starting my radio career. So I was a board operator. And then after 2 years, I transferred to Southern Illinois University Carbondale, which had a really esteemed program in broadcasting. And the reason it did wasn't necessarily the curriculum, it was because the student-run radio station was totally run by students.
Okay.
So when I arrived on campus as a junior, I felt like I was going to be behind, but actually by the first semester, I was assistant program director to the urban radio station college. We had 2 days of the week we were urban, so I was assistant program director there, and I actually got a job at the top 40 station on the weekend. So I was actually working in radio and going to college
Okay.
at the same time. I majored in radio television. So then after graduation, my first gig was in Huntsville, Alabama. And after Huntsville was Huntsville, it was Charleston, it was St. Louis, where I met my wife. Then it was moved to DC. It was Baltimore, where it became Marc, Clarke and the Big Fat Morning Show. And then WHUR, and then New York, and then Baltimore. And so then
Wow.
after the radio portion, I found myself at home and frustrated with radio, and I lost 100 pounds. I
That's
think
the
at that point,
reinventing Marc Clarke. I saw some of that online.
oh, look at
That was
you.
I was gonna get to that part. You're kind of
Look
like
at you.
you're taking all the dialogue. So I can't put in that part. I want to slide that in there, right? So
Look
the
at you, Doc.
reinvention was
Always.
not just about radio. It was also about you personally as well, reinventing you.
Yeah, look at you. All you're doing the research. That's why you are Dr. Pan. And so, yeah,
So
that was
losing
that.
100 pounds is not easy to do. I mean, we see that Ozempic is out here and people are doing it, and Oprah has done it and she looks fabulous, but she was already in TV, whether she was big or small, right? So your 100 pounds was actually a journey that you did virtually, I guess you would say. You blogged it or vlogged it.
Yeah, yeah. I started, so I was 372 pounds. So I was at my heaviest. I didn't have a gig. I was in a funk, I guess. I hate to say that because Allison always says I have no high highs and no low lows. I mean, I wouldn't say I was depressed, but I was definitely in a funk. Like, what's next?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so I started this journey. I got on the treadmill and I started just walking on the treadmill with a motivational message every day. And
Hmm.
so then I decided to do the weight loss surgery.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
so, and again, I just was honest about every step. So I was,
Right.
that's my brand is that's kind of my brand. My brand is family guy and pretty candid guy. And
Mm-hmm,
so,
mm-hmm. And the
but
radio guy, the guy that
and
likes the microphone, guy that likes the
and
microphone. There is
exactly.
a gentleman that is in Detroit. He's a news director at Fox 2 News here in Detroit. His name is Alex Kimbrough. And Alex also was always heavy most of his life. I've known him from Cass Tech through college, everything. And he was probably about almost about 400 pounds. He got the surgery. And he is a different person now. He's still in news, the news director. He's been doing that for probably 30 years. And it is like the way other people see him, he says, is so interesting to him. That's the
Yes.
part that he finds is because he was big his entire life. And his wife, she had the surgery too. She didn't have to lose as much, but they both had it together because of health reasons. They wanted to get healthier. So what has been so after you lost the weight, Marc, then it was Marc Clarke, reinvented Marc Clarke. Then is that when you started looking at the television more?
Yeah, I didn't do so. People used to always ask me about, have you ever thought about television? And to be honest, Dr. Pam, I think I was scarred by. So when I was in college, and I didn't really, how you don't really you don't really think about stuff. You just kind of like live your life, right? So my dream was television first.
Mhm.
Brian Gumble, Howard Cosell. That was my
Yeah,
dream first.
yeah.
I go to college. Like I told you, I arrived as a junior. I thought I'd be behind, but I got on the radio, got on a commercial radio station. I was the only African American who auditioned for the television, the college television station. I got on that. So I had a tape. I came out of college with a tape. I had everything. I had my tape. I was ready to go. I go back to Springfield, which is market back then was like market 199. And the news director was like, "You need more experience." I was like, "I need more experience." You know what I mean? In my mind, I think, and I think Dr. Pam, I think subconsciously that really got me. That really like turned the
Mm-hmm.
TV switch off
Mm-hmm.
because it didn't
You
make sense to still pursue TV when I did radio, but I was totally turned off. And then, it really turned me off was when you go to different markets and you talk to people and you say, "How you get started?" They'll be like, "Well, I was at a store, I was a store selling shoes and somebody said you'd be good on TV." I was like, "What?"
Right,
So,
and you've been in broadcasting for years at that point. A lot of
so
times there has been one situation if you don't have mentors, and this is for anybody out here, if you don't have mentors or people who even you can read about in a book or those kind of things, one person who's so ignorant can just really, turn you off. My husband, who did the voiceover for the opening of this show, he was also to wanting to go into radio, into broadcasting, but because he went to school, like, during the '70s, they didn't have, like, really the career that he wanted. They didn't have a radio broadcasting curriculum. They
yeah,
had a radio station, and he worked there, but there was not a curriculum, so he majored in marketing, and then when he graduated, because he didn't have that, quote, unquote, "the training," he went into marketing. He always still loving radio, always still loving that, but the particular school at that time didn't have that particular major. It was just like either you can do marketing or advertising, but there's no radio broadcasting. We got a radio station here and you could work here. And so he did like a jazz show, but that was at that point he just felt like, well, I guess that dream is over. But what you're saying, it's never really over because things will happen in your life. You
yeah.
meet a TV life partner, Allison, who's in television, and then eventually you start doing television as well.
Yeah, yeah. I was so at my wife's station, a young lady was pregnant, and they were looking for a replacement, a temporary replacement for the lifestyle show. And I'd been a guest on the lifestyle show multiple times. And so I was like, well, I put in for it and I got it. So that
You
that
got it.
August, yeah, that August through December, I got the gig, and it was like, so radio, which is my heart, and radio really. I always used to say, and my boss would hated it because you know how you get too deep. I'd be like, it's a living organism, the show's a living organism, and blah 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 blah, and they'd be like, whatever, you're talking too much. But television, you asked this question at the beginning of the show. You're absolutely right. It's a different animal. And it made me understand people who came from television totally different because when it was radio, I did mornings. It was my concepts. It was straight to radio. I started here and then open the mic and make it happen. My producers, they did book the guests for the most part, but I also booked guests and I pretty much always crafted everything. I kind of like was my own producer, pretty
Mhm,
much. And then you
mhm.
go to television and all these different people, and I get it. Even like with interviews, Doc, I was the worst when people would come in they'd have the questions. I never took the questions. I'd be like, no, I gotta feel it out. I gotta get a feel. PR people used to hate that, I'm sure. But then when I did television, where you have a set amount of time, and if you have a client that paid for this interview, you got to ask these questions. So it made me, the light finally came on at 50 plus, like, oh, okay. You know, they have 4 questions I'm going to ask because they paid $1,500.
Mhm,
And I got
mhm.
to get it in and still be natural. So it definitely was a learning curve, but it also it was great information and helped me understand the role and how TV relies on many more people. It's more corporate. Radio's kind of wild. It's kind of wild now. Radio is almost like a dinosaur, which breaks my heart because it switched from personality driven to most of the personalities now are well known, either comedians
Yeah,
or actors, especially in black radio. I saw that switch happen too, where syndication comes in. And the irony,
syndication.
Dr. Pam, was for me from yeah, the irony for me is when you look at Steve Harvey and and a lot of the people DL, they loved, as guests, they used to love to come on the shows. And I just think it's funny, most of their bits, you know, the letter, the strawberry letter, the so-and-so,
Hmm.
these are bits that's been around since the beginning of time.
Right.
And, you know, it's like you said, nobody recreated the wheel, but they're allowed because they're celebrities. They were allowed much more freedoms than the local guys were allowed. So that's kind
I
of
always
like,
love local radio and Black Talk Radio. Radio One had, a station here. Kathy Hughes just really built that whole brand of the local talk show. This is where we could talk. WHUR, in a way, they have the urban one, and Karen Hunter kind of does that as well. But it's syndicated, and but it's nothing like local radio in your market where you can actually go and see, and they're involved in all of the events in your community. They are the community leaders, really, the radio people. They're the
yeah,
community
yeah,
leaders. They have the voice.
yeah,
And that has been something that I just really, from print, you have the Afro, the Washington Informer, we got the Michigan Chronicle, you got all the real times media, you got the Black radio stations. That's where we have our voice, that's where we tell our stories. I want to go back to something, Mark, that people may not have caught and they may not know. And I just did a blog today about a pay to play. And as a publicist, this is something that's different that didn't used to be. We used to call it earned media, where I would take a press release, I would pitch a story to a journalist, to a producer, and then they would come on their show. Well, now there is what they call sponsored segments. So, sponsored segments is nothing new, but it's just more prevalent now. And we call it pay to play, meaning that you can come on to a segment, you could pay and then actually have a show. So tell us how that works. Every station has it. Mostly every
yeah.
station has it. Tinga, Sinclair, it's these broadcast conglomerates. I mean, they have figured out a way that television is shrinking and they had to figure out another way to make money. They used to do ads, just straight ads, but people don't
Yeah,
want the straight ads. They want to be on the show. So they will
yeah.
just figure like, well, let's do this. So tell us about what the sponsored segments look like.
Yeah, and what's interesting is even on the national morning shows, it almost is jarring when you see, like you said, it used to be they come on with, "Hey, girl, what's the latest dress from so and so fashion segment?" Now it's a paid segment, right? So that client, that client is paid for that 3 or 4 minutes. They pay for, like you said, a commercial, and
Mhm.
most of the time they'll have specific questions. It can go from specific questions and content that they want to feature to them controlling it, where they have someone like a pitch man or pitch woman show the different products and then tell you the website to go to. So yeah, that you're right. It's kind of like it's a big deal,
Mhm.
and it's
Mhm.
something. It wasn't around. It was different. It was different. Just shoot, mere 5 years ago. It's very
Yeah.
prominent now, and it's here to stay. But it does create another, and that's the other thing, Doc, that I realized with television. And I think the one thing about most talents, they don't understand what that means. So my skill set, I could be a pitch man, I could be a voiceover guy, I could be a spokesman.
Mm.
There's so many things that trained professionals in media can do now that, whereas as an old radio guy, you just love radio and that's all you did, you know. And so, Doc, you've been saying this for years. Speaking, understanding your value. And the other
Mhm.
part, the main thing, Doc, that I now understand that I'm doing my own business is that the sad part about personalities is we had the value. Not only we have the voice and the face, but that platform we were on, that guest that came on was getting value every time they came on with you. But we
Mhm.
didn't even leverage it. Like me and Allison are the worst. So, like for instance, Allison in Washington, D.C., and you know how prominent Allison is. She never met the Obamas. All those people, all the people that we know, all the PR, marketing, all the favors that we've done, and not once did, and she would never do it. I also wouldn't say, "Hey, I really would like to meet the
Right.
Obama." She would never
Right.
do it. we never used, just like with me, the late Elijah Cummings, I'll never forget it, when the Big Fat Morning Show, we were rolling. Elijah Cummings was a regular guest. He pulled us aside one day, said, "Hey man, after the show, come by my office. I want to talk to you guys." And he just pulled us in the office and he's just like, "Okay, so what are you guys doing after this?" You know, we're like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You know how this radio thing's gonna end. What are your plans?" And it was like crickets. We didn't have no
Mm,
plans. You
mhm.
know, it was like, because
I
he
love what I do.
basically,
Yeah.
yeah, what it's kind of like, and you know, thankfully for me, Allison and I just talked about this on the podcast. Thankfully for me, as an only child, the mistake I didn't do that I think most people do is their job becomes who they are.
Mm,
You know, as much as I
their
love radio,
identity. Yeah.
yeah, as much as I love radio, and my goodness, I love radio, as much as I love television, that's still, when I lost that job or I lose a job or I step away from a job, I'm still me.
Yeah.
I'm still me. And I think that part I'm proud of because it's easy to get caught up. It's easy
Mhm.
to get caught up.
I find that when I spoke a few years ago at NABJ at the National Convention here in Detroit when they had it, one of the sessions I did was how to turn your content into cash. And so, journalists, they're storytellers. They know how to tell a story. They have a lot of content. I was talking with someone the other day, and they says I probably, I go on radio and my stories are only like maybe 5 minutes, but I interview them maybe for half an hour. I still have a lot of that content. I said, well, you need to turn those into stories and
Yeah.
and really cash in on that. Turn your content into cash. But as a journalist or someone who's in broadcasting, you're not taught the marketing or the sales part of leveraging your brand. Other people will see it, but I think that people who work in it, they don't see it and they don't leverage it. Now, I will say the younger people do because they have
Yes.
social media
You're
because
right, man.
they will take a picture of themselves behind the news desk, or they'll take a picture of themselves walking into the studio. I mean, they're doing all this behind the scenes stuff, and it's kind of like, if you work there, this is just my job. This is what I do.
You're
But
right.
they realize that people who don't work in that industry are so fascinated, and then
Yes.
they become their own brand about what they do for their job. And then
You're
they
right.
realize the power of that, and it's really interesting when you look at the 2 different, I guess you would say, the split between those that grew up with the social media and then those
Yes.
that are the MMJs, I guess you would say, those folks. They have a better understanding of the marketing of their brand, and
That's,
which is cool, but
that's,
the main thing is that if someone is going to pitch you, whether they're gonna be on radio or television, what will be the top 2 things that they need to do in order to sit on the couch or get behind the mic,
yeah. Um, if they're pitching me, um,
or Allison or any news
yeah,
producer
yeah.
or
Well, like you
anybody
said,
who. Mhm.
I think you're right. I think Doc, the first thing is most people don't understand what's compelling or
What's
no,
news?
yeah, what's news, knowing the market, and it's ironic. It seems like the people who really do have the greatest stories almost don't realize they have it, and then the other people who have terrible stories, they're the
They are
best. They
pitching
pitch
all day.
all the time.
Yes,
They
that
pitch
is so
all
true.
the time. They pitch all
That's
the
so
time.
true.
I think Alice and I are similar in that, we've always, I think our personalities align with, we are definitely of the people, for the people. And
Mhm.
so our compelling stories are always going to be somebody who's doing some great things in the community, somebody who's has some information that's life changing,
Yes.
somebody who's even had a challenge and needs the world to know. So that's always good. I'm a sucker for that all the time,
Mhm.
because that's just how I'm hardwired. If I have an opportunity, which I did in this last situation, where I could pick and choose, it's always something the security guy said, man, you always do. You say all these people you pick are people who probably would never have been on television. And I was like, now, and Doc, are you from Detroit?
Mhm. Mhm.
So let me say this. I'm going to have to, Detroit rubbed off on me. I was born in Detroit and I lived there as until I was 3. But my mother And that rich soil of Detroit radio. Now, come on now. My mother used to talk about, you probably remember this. What's her name?
Martha
Martha Jean the
Jean the
Queen?
Queen.
Yeah, so, you know, my mom worked for the government. My mom worked for the government in Detroit, and my aunt worked at the post office. So, you know,
Martha,
it was,
yeah, those were some strong women. She was one of the first African American women to own a radio station, Martha
yeah,
Jean the Queen. And I worked for there. I worked for her. I did
wow.
PR for her, did her marketing. I did her first media kit. Though, I mean, she was amazing. We just talked about her the other day. Another Black woman that was like the first African American woman general manager for a station was Verna Green. She was at WJLB,
Yeah,
and we did a little honoring of her for just to give her flowers while all the careers that she started, whether it was John Mason or uh Mildred
yeah,
Gaddis was there. I mean, just all of the old radio legends that
yeah,
WJLB birthed out of during that time. And it was different then. Local radio was just where it was happening.
it was.
Yeah, yeah.
Detroit,
Well,
Detroit reminds me a lot of Baltimore in that you have these great cities who, if you are a part of it, if you know, they're amazing cities that have a pretty, like a bad, the PR for the city's bad. You know what I mean?
it is.
But
It is.
if you work there or you're from there, then you know how amazing. And so, I'm going to take you back. So, because my mother's had her glory years in Detroit. Is that our wrap up?
Anyway, we got a couple of minutes. So you know the cues.
That's the cue. I heard the wrap up. Okay, well, I'll share this on the next interview.
All right. I would love that, because one of the things I want you to be in your studio, and I just appreciate you taking the time to really just share the nuggets that you did today, because reinventing Marc Clarke, you're into the next pivot. And I put it up here where I want people to contact you for that Marc Clarke media training is very, very important if you're going to do any broadcast, and not be afraid of it. So I guess part of it is sometimes in people's head, and you can help them with that as well, but Marc Clarke Media as well. And I love the fact that you got a book coming up. What's the name of the book?
Be the Father You Always Wanted.
I love that. That. And you've got 3 beautiful girls.
I got one in med school at Howard and 2 others in school, one at Clarke and then one Norfolk State. So yeah, HBCUs, baby.
Any media people in the crowd? They don't know yet? Are they going to be any media people in the crowd?
Oh, I'm sorry. That was for me. I don't think so. I think they all are amazing communicators, but I think they're like, I'm good.
It's like, I seen mom do it, I seen dad do it. You all did enough for both of us. I get it. Well, that is so true. But you never know, because they can always, if they're good communicators, they can lead into it. One goes to medical school and she can be a commentator, a health reporter like Sanjay Gupta on CNN. You know what I'm saying? So you just never know how it works out, because they feel that's so natural. It's like, doesn't everybody do that? That's what mom and dad do. So
that's kind of how they are. You're right. That is exactly how they are. You're right.
It's like, no, that's not what well, thank you so much for joining us today for Get Out There, Get Known podcast, Marc. And I can't wait to hear about your book. And that's when I want you to come back and talk about that.
Okay.
As well, okay. All right.
Well, Doc, thank you again for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So that was Marc Clarke. Make sure that you go to Marc Clarke Media. All righty. I'm Pam Perry, and I'm out.
You've been listening to the Get Out There and Get Known podcast, brought to you by PamPerryPR.com, where you'll get insider tips on how to build your platform, pitch the media, and promote yourself with confidence. Head over to PamPerryPR.com and get the exclusive video training on the 7 must-have marketing materials you need before you pitch in order to be considered in media places or superstar stages. PamPerryPR.com, where you help you shine like a superstar.